See how much easier it is to maneuver without having the parts of the chaps snag these shifter sticks and stuff like that. It's kind of chilly today, quite a bit chillier than yesterday for sure. And the camera's not going to pick it up, but there's a slight drizzle of snow. Snow's coming in. And it's early spring, so we have spring storms here in New York. And I put the 585 back in the truck where it's going to stay for a while and replaced it with my 372 blend of what started out with that g372X torque, right, from Husqvarna, and then I had swapped on an OEM handle because I couldn't stand the plastic handle that was on there, that square design, and then did my normal X-Torque mods to that Chinese cylinder. That saw pretty much typifies, you know, a hobby saw where a person has fun taking junk and turning it into a useful machine. Some people like doing that, some people don't. 2 junk pile saws. That may have started as one of these, but about the only thing left that's Chinese on that saw is that piece of plastic, the cases, the cylinder, intake boot, carburetor, the filter holder, that part. The muffler started out is Chinese. So again, the only thing Chinese is the cases, bearings, seals, flywheel, carburetor, intake boot, cylinder, and muffler. Not even the controls are from the original saw. But it works. I had fun. It's ugly. It's Cyclops 2.0. It runs really well. And the more I run it, the better it gets, as usual. And of course, that's a junk pile build. That turned out to be, that's a sharp saw. And the big modifications on that is a pop-up piston muffler mod, which I botched, which caused me to modify the saw by putting that kit on there, the full wrap and the big bucking spikes, which created another problem. And I cut this back far enough, so really that's the first bucking spike that gets into the log for the most part. I cut the bottom one back maybe a little too much, but either way it works really good. So anyway, why did the 585 get out of the bucket? And this is the point. That's a rough ride. A lot of dirt, gets beat up. That 585 is a very expensive toy. You know, I got $1,000 into that thing. So the point is, why would I take $1,000 machine and beat the living crap out of it when I have these right here, which work just fine, thank you very much. And my premise on that Husqvarna blend is that it's going to run for as long as I want to run a saw. And if that's the case, just think of how much wear and tear I don't put on my expensive saws. And I have fun with it because every time it fires up and runs, it's beating the odds. Those 2 saws combined have about the same money into them as a brand new 585. So I prefer to use them. Beat them up. You know, let them get scratched up and broke up and tumble out of the tractor, get crushed by a tree, stuff like that. The converse of that is there's a lot of people who turn their business into their hobby, but also like to show off because they're successful and they're proud of what they do. And then you have the high-end saws as part of the nice truck and good equipment, which is a reward for working hard and being successful. I get all that too. But I'm not one of those guys. You know, I'm not making lots of money doing this. I'm managing a farm, my own farm. And it's kind of a rough life out here for the saws. So I prefer to beat up the, you know, beat up the older ones than hurt the new ones. That's the point. Let's see which one gets fired up and wants to go to work the quickest. Yesterday the 585 started one less pull than the 572, and the 585 right out of the bucket, as soon as it started, it was ready to work. I had no issues with it stalling. The starts and restarts were good. It really wasn't running too rich. And the 572 had to go through its little temper tantrum and retune itself. So in yesterday's experience, the 585 with a standard carburetor was actually a little bit easier to deal with. Alright, auto tune first. For that matter, auto tune with a primer bulb, right? 3 pulls is what I like to see. 4 is acceptable. 5 I don't like. 6 it's a fail. That was quite the wrap, huh? All right, let's evaluate the cut. I had to make enough room for my 24, and I couldn't quite reach across, but I did reach far enough across. That's pretty good, actually, see? And again, it broke down in instead of up into the tree. So let's get this thing, the saw log bucked out of it and get it up on the landing. A little surprised it didn't break itself on that whack. You know, the reason I wanted to do it this way, and I should refrain from doing this, this always gets me in trouble, is, I don't know, there was somebody who was saying that somehow when you do a bore cut, you get sort of a snap, and it releases and sets a stress into the tree. The premise being that sudden release will jolt the hinge to break in a premature way. I have a whole bunch of really heavy lean trees where I bore cut, and when you release the strap, you didn't have some kind of an explosion breaking that hinge. In fact, it released quite cleanly. And the message is this: you know, a person is going to do, especially in a high stress situation, what they're most familiar with doing. And if a guy spent his entire life chasing trees, well, that's what they're going to do, and they're going to rationalize it. And the premise behind chasing a tree is that you can somehow guide it with your cuts. And there's a certain amount of truth in that, but there's some inherent dangers in that. Now, as far as the bore cut and then the back cut, the strap, the whole premise of that is you have time to adjust your hinge as big or as small as you want. Of course, you can go too far, then that's your own screw up, and you would have done that anyway. And get it set up before you release it. You have the time. You can step back, you can evaluate. And if you somehow cut too much of your hinge out and it goes the wrong way, that's on you, bud, because you didn't set it up properly. But doing that style of cut is not going to somehow make it go a different direction. The direction the tree is going to go is based on the hinge and your hinge design. And that comes with experience. If you know what you're doing, you leave a little more hinge, you sacrifice some pull, and you make sure the tree goes in the right way. You know, and if you have a little less hinge, you get less chances of a barber chair and all that, but you also have a greater chance of it breaking off. And that doesn't matter whether you're chasing the cut or you're doing a bore cut. It means it doesn't matter. It's based on the design on your hinge, whether you got it right, and it starts with your face cut. So I reject it completely because I've done so many hardwood trees now with the bore cut and then release it, to know that it doesn't induce any additional stress to the hinge by letting the back strap go. It doesn't do that. That's bullshit. Sorry. Having said that, taking that approach has given me the time to design a better face cut and hinge to get a better result, whether it be, you know, less chance of pull with a bore cut in the front, or taking more of the hinge out if I need to get a better looking stump, or leaving more hinge if it's a leaner and I need to have that kind of control. But I listened to it and I realized that he was like blenderizing a whole bunch of concepts at once, trying to make it make sense to why he does what he does. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't freaking matter. In a high stress situation like that, a guy has to go back to what's most comfortable for him. And if that's what you've done all your life and it works, you got to do that in that high stress situation until you've developed another strategy that works for you. And that's really what it boils down to. Not one versus the other. It's what a man can use as a tool to get the job done based on his experience and the things that have worked for him. And it doesn't really matter if it's a bore cut or a chasing style cut. It doesn't really matter at that point. You got to use what you know how to do. Let's see if it starts. No. Does it? Now there's another thing I want you to look at. I want you to look at that bark. See that bark? That's a hard maple tree. That's a sugar maple tree. Take a look at this bark. Another maple. Let me see if I can find an ash or a hickory tree so you can see what that bark looks like. There's another maple tree right there. Sugar maple is what that one is. Got a bunch of them out in there. That's pretty much primarily what grows on this farm is hard maple. That's a hickory tree right here. A little tighter bark. Oh boy. When you start seeing those little Ys like that, upside down, when it's a shallow bark, it's a hickory. And the way you can tell is when you look up there at the top, they're kind of randomly extended from each other. They're not like symmetric. One branch straight across from the other would be like an ash. But when they're kind of random like that, that's hickory. I know I've got a pretty nice hickory tree on this trail. No, I'm not going to get it. I'm going to leave it right alone. Maple, right there. Oh, there it is. There you go. Here's a hickory tree. Nice one. That one's easily 28 at the bottom and 24 on the top. Take a look at that bark. When you see a pattern like that, see it? Usually that's either hickory or ash. They have a similar pattern, a bunch of upside down Ys. And this one you can tell is a hickory from the branches up there. Yet again, they sort of randomly grow out. What in the heck's name is that? Somebody saw fit to do that. Can't imagine who. It wasn't me. So, man, I wish I had an ash around here. I could show you an ash tree. Nope, don't have one. Hickory and hard maple is all I got. Well, it pretty much went where I wanted it to. Now, I did wedge it, but that tree wanted to go there, not there. And this is the bore cut, back cut approach to cutting trees. And along with wedges and some, I put a pretty heavy hinge in there because I want to make darn sure of where it went. Usually on a heavy lean, when you cut the back strap, nothing happens. Nothing at all, because it's actually compressed down into the tree over here. So, but what the bore cut does do, it gives you a chance to get out and look and release it when you're ready, not when it's ready. Where if you know, remember that movie Independence Day where a bunch of guys are standing underneath the spaceship looking up at the pretty lights? Well, that's what I see when I see a guy sitting there looking up in on a hard wood type tree. You know, the big firs, that's different. But on a tree like this, where there are definitely branches up there that are dead, standing there looking up at the lights waiting for something to happen while you're sawing down by your legs, can't see what the saw is doing, hoping something moves to give you a clue. That to me is not the smartest approach. What I'd rather do is like I did right here, set it up, get the wedges where I want them, you know, make the hinge the way I want based on your experience. And then when you've got the tree set the way you want it, the hinge set the way you want it, etc., then you cut the tree loose. And then it's fallen at your discretion, at your time frame, versus when you're following the tree with a saw or chasing the tree with a saw. When it starts going, just like with a bore cut backstrap, it's going. The only difference is with the bore cut back cut, I'm out of there. Nothing's going to come down. I'm not waiting for something and looking up in the starlight there, waiting for something to hit me right in the freaking head. I cut it and leave. And if something's going to fall, it'll fall when the tree starts to move, but often the tree does not move until I'm well out of the way, is the point. So, there you go. Now I have a mess to clean up because I dropped it right in the freaking road. So I got to cut the top out, limit some, and then hook onto this and drag it up to the landing. way do you think this one's going to go? Huh. We'll see. This is a little bit of a sketchy one for me. And I'm going to try to wedge it over that way, even though it looks like it's going that way. If you look at the center line and go straight up, actually the top portion of the tree is going that direction, so it should help me. And this is where you need a lot of wedge. A lot of wedge. Just to make sure. hinges are not as strong as I would like. So let's see if we can wedge it over. If you look at it, we got it going. We moved that top probably 8-10 feet, and you can see the dangerous spot of that tree is actually now completely cut through. And if you look really carefully, you can see how that hinge is beginning to break down into the stump because I've left that really high wood. I call that my oh shit cut, excuse my language, where I leave a little bit of high wood there. That freaking hinge is probably the strongest part of that whole tree. It's going. Look at that thing bounce.